if you're working for a company that has a 401k plan, as long as you're not more than a 10% owner in the company, then you have the ability to leave the money in your 401k, actually keep contributing to the 401k, and upon your retirement, you have to start your RMDs the year after that you retire. So that's another way that you could also help delay your RMDs beyond age 72.
Are you ready for a successful retirement? We're addressing the topics facing today's retirees. Welcome to Retire with Ryan. Now here's your host, Ryan Morrissey.
Welcome back. So glad that you're tuning in today. Today we're going to address required minimum distributions, also sometimes known as RMDs, and really talking about how they're being impacted in 2020 by what's known as the CARES Act, which was enacted as a result of what we're going through with COVID-19. So a little background on RMDs. If you're not familiar, there was also another change too with the Secure Act. So normally, if you think about a 401k or an IRA, you're taking a deduction when the money goes in, but there comes a certain point in time where the IRS needs their money back. They've allowed you to take this deduction, enjoyed tax-deferred growth. So it used to be when you turned 70 and a half, you had to start taking out a certain amount from the account. And there are a few different charts that you would refer to. And roughly at age 70 and a half, you'd have to take out about 3.5% of your account. Well, as a result of the CARES Act, that was actually increased to age 72. But, not confuse all these different acts that were passed, but as a result of the CARES Act as well, the RMD for 2020 has actually been suspended. So let's just say you were turning 70 and a half in 2020. Well, now that RMD has been suspended until you turn 72. So you have a few more years to wait. But let's just say you had turned 78 and a half in a prior year, or you had inherited an IRA from someone who had passed away. Well, you have the ability to actually delay and not take any RMD for 2020. So first and foremost, that's something you should understand. With a lot of people, they end up waiting until the end of the year to take their RMD. So hopefully you haven't decided to already take your RMD, because if you have, now you have a choice. You could actually take it if it makes sense tax-wise, or if you need the income. If you're in a lower tax bracket, then it might make sense to actually take the money this year, take the distribution, versus if you think you're going to be in a higher tax bracket in the future. But you have the ability, if you are required to take money out of an IRA, a 401k, 403B plan, SEP, Simple, 457 plan, to thrift plan, to avoid taking that money out for this year. But let's just say you have taken the money out for this year. Well, what should you do? Well, up until recently, you only had 60 days to make a decision on what to do with that money. So there's another rule called the 60-day rollover rule, which allows you to roll money back to an IRA that you've taken out as a distribution from a 401k or another retirement plan. But you only have 60 days from when you do that. So when everything was going on, the height of the coronavirus in March, this information came out that RMDs were going to be waived as a result of the CARES Act, but you only had a 60-day window. Well, luckily, the IRS has released another notice saying that you actually have until August 31st to roll any monies you've taken out for this year back into an IRA if you decided that you don't want them. So if you have taken money out of an IRA, a 401k, and you've decided that you no longer want it, well, you have a few choices. One, you could roll that money, all of it, up until August 31st, back into the IRA where it came from, another IRA. You don't have to worry about that 60-day window that you previously had to worry about. So that is one option. And if you don't need the money, that could be the best option for you, especially if, you're in a higher tax bracket or you are going to be in a lower tax bracket maybe in future years. So that's one option. Another option is that what could make sense is that you could actually convert that money into a Roth IRA. And you'd want to do that if, again, you don't really need the money at this point, or you think we're going to go into possibly higher tax rates in the future. That's something that, I think is a possibility for all of us. We have a lot of debt that we owe as a country. And there's even talk about with the upcoming election that if Joe Biden is elected, that he will increase tax rates for everyone. So that's a possibility that might even happen in the near future. So if you either, think tax rates are going to go up in the future, or you're also trying to maybe set up a legacy with part of your money or get part of your money into a Roth and you weren't able to do it before, this can be an excellent way to do that. You take what would have normally been your required minimum distribution and you roll that over to a Roth IRA. Now, it is taxable when the money comes out, whatever it is. Let's just say it's $20,000. You will have to pay tax on that. But the good thing is that you don't have a required minimum distribution for this year. So normally, if you had to take $20,000 out and it was part of your required minimum distribution, you're actually not allowed to roll that over to a Roth IRA. That's not allowed. So you'd have to take out the money equivalent to your required minimum distribution, and then you'd have to convert to a Roth IRA anything above that you wanted. So this is a unique year that you have the opportunity to do it without worrying about your required minimum distribution. So that is something to think about. But you have to act quickly because you only have until August 31st. Now, let's just say normally you wait until the end of the year, and that is when you were going to take your distribution. You still could do that and convert it to a Roth, but it could make more sense to do it sooner. It gets the money into the Roth account more quickly and, gets it working for you in a quicker fashion. Another thing to think about is whether or not you're the beneficiary. If your distribution coming out of your account is due to having an IRA that's not your IRA. Let's just say your parent passed away and you inherit an IRA from mom or dad, and every year with those accounts, you also have to take a required minimum distribution out with those as well. So provided that this individual passed away before 2020, there's a certain percentage that you have to take out every year, and that is also waived for this year. However, you don't have the ability at any point to roll money back into an IRA if it's not your own IRA. So unfortunately, if you have taken out a distribution from a IRA that's not your own, a required minimum distribution, you unfortunately don't have the ability to roll that back over. So what could you do with that? Well, unfortunately, you just have to bite the bullet on the taxes on that. But let's just say you're getting money out monthly. Rather than continuing that for the remainder of the year, you could stop that now and hold off for the rest of the year. Let's just say, as I mentioned before, you haven't taken out your distribution and you normally do it at the end of the year. Well, you could instruct wherever your money is held, instruct your advisor, your whatever financial institution you deal with, that you don't want your distribution for this year, and you could hold off, and then that will just be factored into your distribution in future years. Another thing to think about is that if, unfortunately, you have inherited an IRA this year from someone who passed away, a non-spouse, for example, a parent, then there was a change with that as well through the Secure Act. And with the Secure Act, as I mentioned before, the required minimum distribution age also changed from 70 to 72, but they also took away what was known as a stretch IRA provision, which would allow you, if you inherited an IRA from a non-spouse, to stretch the distributions out over your lifetime. So how would that work? Well, there's one of these three charts that the IRS has that dictates how much money you take out of an IRA. There's a chart on there for beneficiaries of an IRA, and you were able to take out the money over whatever your life expectancy was. Well, unfortunately, that has been eliminated. And so if you inherit an IRA from someone who passes away this year or after, you have 10 years until the account has to be emptied out. So you could wait, and initially you could take it all out in the first year and pay tax on it. You could take out a little bit each year, or you could take it all out in year 10. There is no requirement to take out a certain percentage each year. As in prior years, anyone who passed away prior to 2020, you had to take out a certain percentage each year, and that percentage got recalculated on an annual basis, just like traditional required minimum distribution works. However, going forward, that's not the case. So the things to think about with this are, what your tax situation looks like. If you inherit an account from a parent who recently passed away and you're still working and you're in your peak earning years, well, rather than taking this money out and adding it to any other earned income you have, you could wait until you retire, and then you could maybe take a little bit out, whatever's the remaining in the 10 years. You could retire and presumably have no income from employment income, and you could take a lot of it out in that 1 year. So you have different options available to you as far as how you manage that. And I really think you need to look at that from a tax standpoint, because it is a nice benefit for those people that have inherited IRAs from a non-spouse prior to 2020, because they have the ability to really have those IRAs last a long period of time. But unfortunately now that isn't the case unless this has changed in the future, but I doubt it, because I think it was something that Congress had addressed a number of times but was never passed because it was looked at as like a tax loophole. So additionally, there is something called the coronavirus-related distributions, where if you were impacted by coronavirus and directly impacted and it created financial hardship, then you have the ability to take money out of your IRA beginning back to January 1 of 2020, and you have the ability to roll that money back to your IRA within 3 years. So beyond the August 31st deadline of this year, but you have to have been directly impacted by COVID. So if you weren't, I wouldn't push that. Another thing that you can do to help keep RMDs off of your income stream is you can always donate your RMD directly to a charity. So let's just say you need to take out $15,000 from your IRA, and you could have that money directly sent to a charity of your choosing, to multiple charities. And as long as it goes directly to the charity, then that's not considered taxable income for you. This is something you could do in 2020, or you can do it beyond 2020, as long as they don't change the rules on that. So that is another way that you can satisfy your RMD, but also give back to a charity. And especially now, given the fact that with the elimination a few years back of the itemized deduction, chances are that if you're close to retiring or retired, you probably can't itemize anymore. So you're not actually getting a deduction for making a contribution to a charity. So this actually helps you because it satisfies your RMD and also donates to the charity. Another thing that you can do to help delay RMDs beyond age 72 is you can work past 72. If you're working for a company that has a 401k plan, as long as you're not more than a 10% owner in the company, then you have the ability to leave the money in your 401k, actually keep contributing to the 401k, and upon your retirement, you have to start your RMDs the year after that you retire. So that's another way that you could also help delay your RMDs beyond age 72. It is nice that it has been pushed to 72 from, as I said before, from 70 and a half, but this is a way that you can delay that. So the key things to know are that if you took any RMDs for this year and after looking at your tax situation, you decided that you don't really want that income for this year, make sure that you take action and you get that money rolled either back over to your IRA before August 31st, or if it makes sense to convert it to a Roth IRA if you're okay with the income, or if you are directly impacted by COVID-19 in 2020, then you have up to 3 years after to decide to roll that money back to an IRA. So I hope this helps to get you up to date on the changes with RMDs for this year. And if you're enjoying this podcast, you may be listening to it through my website, but you also have the ability to go to multiple platforms such as Stitcher, Pandora, iTunes podcast, and subscribe. And then also, if you are liking what you're hearing, if you could give me a 5-star rating, that'd be greatly appreciated, and any comments that you could provide as well. Take care, and we'll be talking to you soon.
You should consult a financial advisor familiar with your specific circumstances before you make any financial decisions. Nothing in this broadcast constitutes a solicitation for the sale or purchase of any securities. Any mention of rates of return are historical or hypothetical in nature and are not a guarantee of future returns. Ryan Morrissey, CFP, is an investment advisor representative of Morrissey Wealth Management, LLC, a registered investment advisor.